The smell of burning incense mixed with ozone still haunts me from when the throne's core fluctuations began their final cascade. They don't want you to know about the protocols buried in the deepest vaults of Terra. The real horror isn't the Emperor's death. It's what happens in the 17 minutes after his psychic scream goes silent. This is my testimony. I was Adept-Prime Theron Vex, Mechanicus liaison to the throne chamber for 23 years. 14 of us knew the secret protocols. Now I'm the only one left to tell you what the Golden Throne's failure really means. Not just for Terra, not just for the Imperium, for every living soul in the galaxy. I've seen the simulations, I've read the forbidden calculations, and I've watched the warning signs that everyone else refuses to see. The end isn't coming, it's already begun. Chapter 1. The Eternal Watch. The throne chamber exists in a state of controlled catastrophe. Most people imagine it as some grand cathedral, all gold and magnificence, the Emperor sitting in peaceful majesty, while the Imperium turns around him like a perfect clockwork mechanism. That's what the propaganda servers broadcast. That's what the pilgrims see in their devotional picts. The reality is a maze of corridors carved from adamantium and ceramite, descending 9 kilometers beneath the Himalayan plateau. Each level requires 17 separate authentication procedures. Each checkpoint is manned by custodian guards who would kill you without hesitation if your biometric signature varies by even 0.03%. The air itself is sacred, recycled through prayer-sanctified filtration systems that have operated for 10,000 years without pause. I remember my first day clearly. I was 37 years old, freshly transferred from the Martian forges, my mind stuffed with technical specifications and blessed machine protocols. I thought I understood the magnitude of my assignment. Magos fabricator General Zagreus Kane himself had chosen me for the honor. "You will serve at the heart of the Imperium," he told me, his mechadendrites forming the sign of the cog mechanicum. "You will ensure the machine god's greatest creation continues its holy function." The Mechanicus understands the Golden Throne as a device, an impossibly complex biomechanical life support system merged with psychic amplification technology that predates the Age of Strife. But we understand it. We maintain it. We keep it functioning through prayer, ritual, and precision engineering. That's what I believed. The descent to the throne chamber takes 43 minutes. You pass through security gates that scan not just your body, but your soul. Psychic nulls, pariahs who make your skin crawl, verify that you carry no warp taint. Servitors hardwired into ancient cogitators check your genetic markers against records that go back to the Unification Wars. Each level feels heavier, the weight of 10 millennia pressing down on your shoulders. Level 7 is where you first hear it. It vibrates in your teeth, in your bones, in the base of your skull, where the meat brain meets the augmetic implants. New adepts always ask what it is. You're hearing the psychic overflow of a god trapped in a dying machine. I spent my first month calibrating plasma conduits in the peripheral maintenance sectors. Standard Mechanicus work, blessed oils, incense thuribles, prayers to the Omnissiah while checking pressure valves and thermal regulators. Each system I tended fed into larger systems, which fed into still larger systems, which eventually connected to the throne itself. We were insects maintaining a mountain. The throne chamber proper, the Sanctum Imperialis, I didn't enter until my 57th day. Nothing prepares you. The ceiling vanishes into darkness despite the banks of lumens that line the walls. And at the center, bathed in golden light, sits the Golden Throne. It looks nothing like the propaganda images. Cables as thick as Hablock support columns snake from the base, pulsing with energies that make your eyes water. Psychic suppression fields create visible distortions in the air. The gold is real. Auramite, the rarest substance in the Imperium, but it's scarred, tarnished, patched in 1,000 places with inferior materials, because there simply isn't enough auramite left to replace what's failed. And seated on the throne, wired into the machine, sustained by it and sustaining it in turn, is the master of mankind. You can't see him clearly. Your augmetic visual receptors shut down automatically, protecting your organic components from burnout. But you feel him. Emperor, preserve me. You feel him. The sheer presence of a consciousness so vast it holds back the tides of the warp itself. A mind that burns like a lighthouse in an infinite storm. Custodian Captain General Trajan Valoris stood beside me during that first entry. He's seen 10,000 adepts pass through this chamber. He knows what's about to happen. Steady yourself, he said quietly. His voice was gentle, almost kind. The first time is always the worst. Not in words, not even in thoughts. But I suddenly understood, with crystalline clarity, every mechanical system in the chamber. Every ritual, every prayer, every adjustment I would ever need to make. The knowledge simply appeared in my mind, vast and complete, downloaded in an instant that felt like centuries. I collapsed. My biological heart stopped. My augmetic systems rebooted automatically, flooding my bloodstream with stimulants and adrenaline. I vomited on the sacred floor, a crime that would normally earn a death sentence. The custodians didn't even react. They'd seen it 1,000 times before. Welcome to the Eternal Watch, Adept-Prime Vex, Valoris said. Now you understand what we protect. Now you understand what we'll become if we fail. I spent the next 23 years in that chamber. My team, 14 Adept Primes, selected from across the Mechanicus forges, maintained the throne's life support functions. We worked in shifts that lasted 18 hours. We slept in cells carved from solid adamantium 3 levels up. We had no contact with the outside world except for technical briefings and supply requisitions. Our families were told we'd been transferred to classified projects. Most of them stopped asking questions after the second year. The work was endless. Each day, approximately 743 minor systems required adjustment. Power fluctuations in the psychic amplifiers, cooling fluid replacement in the neural interface clusters, blessed unguent application to the life support cables, prayer chants synchronized with the machine spirit's operational rhythms. We performed each task with religious precision because we understood the stakes. We were the only thing standing between the Imperium and absolute annihilation. But here's what they never tell the pilgrims, never broadcast on the devotional channels, never admit in the highest councils of Terra. The Golden Throne is failing. Not might fail. Not could fail. Is failing. Has been failing for thousands of years. The Emperor's original design was perfect, but he built it with technology from the dark age of technology, tools and knowledge that haven't existed for 15,000 years. When something breaks, and things break constantly, we can't replace it with a genuine component. We jury-rig. We patch together solutions using inferior materials and pray to the Omnissiah that they hold. Every year, the failure rate increases by 0.87%. Every year, the throne edges closer to catastrophic collapse, unauthorized of course. The Mechanicus doesn't approve of personal documentation of sacred systems, but my logic engines demanded data. My training required evidence. I needed to understand not just if the throne would fail, but when. Somewhere between M41.997 and M42.903, roughly speaking, any time in the next 20 to 50 years, a critical threshold would be crossed. The redundant systems would cascade failure. The life support functions would crash simultaneously. And the Emperor, who has sat on the Golden Throne for 10,000 years, holding back the darkness with nothing but his will and this dying machine, would finally expire. I showed my calculations to Magos Kryn, the senior tech priest on my rotation. He deleted them immediately. Then he looked at me with his augmetic eyes, cold, emotionless, purely logical, and said something I'll never forget. We know. The Fabricator General knows. The High Lords know. The Custodians know. Everyone who matters has known for centuries. The projections are accurate, and there is absolutely nothing we can do about it except maintain the systems for as long as possible and pray that the Omnissiah provides a miracle. We'll deal with it when it happens, Kryn interrupted. Either way, our duty is unchanged, continuing to work when you know the work is futile. Chapter 2. Strange Signs. The first anomaly occurred during the graveyard shift, local time, 03:47:22. I was alone in section Tertius Delta, performing routine maintenance on the psychic resonance dampers. Standard work, recalibrating the null field generators that prevent the Emperor's psychic presence from accidentally burning out the minds of everyone on Terra. You adjust the phase variance, check the power draw, apply the blessed oils, chant the litany of stable function, and move to the next unit. The damper activated before I touched it. Just for a second. The null field generator pulsed, the indicator runes flashing amber, then returned to normal. My augmetic eyes recorded the event automatically. Timestamp, duration, power spike magnitude, 0.73 seconds, power increase of 38% above nominal. Then nothing. I ran a full diagnostic. All systems nominal. No faults detected. No explanation in the machine spirit's logic cores. I filed an incident report and continued my shift. 2 days later, Adept-Prime Theron reported a similar event in section Primus Gamma, spontaneous activation of a life support monitor, 3.1 seconds this time, power spike of 42%. Then Adept-Prime Lockies, different section, different system, same pattern. Magos Kryn called an emergency briefing. All 14 of us assembled in the consecrated conference chamber 3 levels above the Sanctum Imperialis. We stood around the hololithic projector while Kryn displayed the accumulated data. 17 spontaneous activations in the past 72 hours, he said. His voice carried the flat precision of Mechanicus binaric cant translated into High Gothic. 7 different sections, 12 different system types, no physical connection between the affected components, no common failure mode that would explain the pattern. Chaos? Asked Adept-Prime Ventar. He was young, only 5 years on the throne detail, still jumpy about warp corruption. Unlikely, Kryn replied. The Sanctum Imperialis has the most powerful psychic wards in the galaxy. The Emperor himself maintains barriers that would incinerate a demon prince before it manifested. These activations show no warp taint whatsoever. They are purely technological malfunctions. Except they're not malfunctions, I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. I gestured to the hololithic display. Look at the timestamps. Look at the distribution. These aren't random equipment failures. There's a pattern. The intervals are decreasing. First activation to second activation, 31 hours. Second to third, 28 hours. Third to fourth, 26 hours. The frequency is increasing in a logarithmic progression. Kryn's augmetic eyes word, processing. Extrapolate. I input the commands. The hololithic display shifted, showing a projected timeline. Red markers indicated predicted activation events, growing closer and closer together until they merged into a solid line. If the pattern holds, I said, we'll reach continuous activation in approximately 270 hours, 11.25 days. Continuous activation of what? Theron asked. All systems, I replied. Simultaneously. Every piece of equipment in the throne chamber operating at maximum capacity without input. The power draw alone would exceed our generation capacity by an order of magnitude. The plasma reactors would overload. The cooling systems would fail. The speculation, Kryn interrupted. But I heard the uncertainty in his mechanical voice. We will increase monitoring, triple redundant logging on all systems. If the pattern continues, we will escalate to Captain General Valoris. But the pattern didn't just continue, it accelerated. By day 5, we had spontaneous activations every 3 hours. Minor systems mostly, pressure sensors, thermal monitors, data recording devices, but the randomness had vanished entirely. Now the activations formed a pattern that spiraled through the Sanctum Imperialis, section by section, moving inward toward the throne itself, toward him. Captain General Valoris entered the sanctum on day 6. His presence made the custodians guarding the perimeter snap to even more rigid attention, something I hadn't thought possible. He wore full auramite armor, the golden plate inscribed with oaths dating back to the Emperor's own hand. His guardian spear hummed with barely contained power. "Report," he commanded. Magos Kryn provided the technical details: frequency of activations, power consumption curves, system distribution analysis, the projected timeline to cascade failure. Valoris listened without interruption. When Kryn finished, the Captain General walked to the throne itself. He stood there, golden armor gleaming in the golden light, separated from the master of mankind by maybe 20 meters and 10,000 years of duty. "I will consult the Emperor," he said finally. We all stopped breathing. The custodians can commune with the Emperor in ways we cannot. They were created by him, forged from the same genetic science that produced the Primarchs. The connection goes beyond words, beyond thought. It is brotherhood at the level of the soul. Valoris removed his helmet, set down his guardian spear, knelt before the throne. The psychic pressure in the chamber increased. My augmetic sensors shrieked warnings. The air itself seemed to compress, reality bending under the weight of consciousness, meeting consciousness. 3 minutes passed. When Valoris stood, his face was ashen. I'd never seen a custodian look afraid before. I didn't know they could. "He says it's time," Valoris whispered. "After 10,000 years, the time has finally come." "Time for what?" Kryn asked. Valoris looked at each of us in turn. "Time for us to learn what happens when the Golden Throne fails. Because it's failing now, not in 11 days, not in 200 hours. It's failing right now. These activations, they're not malfunctions. They're the throne's immune system trying to compensate for catastrophic internal decay. The Emperor has been holding together systems that should have collapsed centuries ago through sheer psychic will. But even his will has limits." The chamber was absolutely silent except for the eternal hum of the throne. "How long?" I asked. "Unknown. Days, perhaps. Weeks, if we're fortunate. The degradation is exponential. Each hour, the throne requires more psychic energy to maintain basic function. Each hour, the Emperor's attention is divided between holding back the demonic tides in the warp and keeping this machine operational. Eventually, soon, he will have to choose which duty to abandon." "What are our orders?" Kryn asked. "Continue standard maintenance," Valoris replied, "and prepare for Protocol Omega-7. I felt my organic heart skip. Protocol Omega-7 was whispered about in the deepest archives of the Mechanicus, a contingency plan so secret that most tech priests didn't believe it existed. "I don't have clearance for—" Kryn began. "You do now," Valoris interrupted. "All of you do, because in approximately 72 hours, the Adeptus Custodes will activate the protocol. And when we do, everyone on Terra will know that the Imperium as we understand it has ended." He picked up his guardian spear and helmet. "The Emperor protects. Let us pray that protection extends beyond his death." Then he left, golden armor fading into the shadows of the approach corridor. We stood in the sanctum for a long time, none of us speaking, all of us understanding that we'd just been given a death sentence dressed up as duty. Finally, Magos Kryn broke the silence. "Access Protocol Omega-7. Begin preparations. The Omnissiah has blessed us with the privilege of witnessing the end of an age. Let us be worthy of the honor." I returned to my maintenance station and pulled up the classified files. What I read made me want to rip the augmetics from my skull and run screaming into the wastes. Protocol Omega-7 wasn't a contingency plan. It was an execution protocol, and its target was Holy Terra itself. Chapter 3. Truth Glimpsed. The protocol files were encrypted behind 7 layers of Archaeotech security. Each layer required biometric verification, psychic testing to confirm absence of warp corruption, and spoken oaths that would trigger immediate execution if violated. My hands shook, the organic one, not the augmetic, as I navigated through each checkpoint. The timestamp on the original file made my blood freeze. M31.002. The protocol was created during the heresy itself, probably in the immediate aftermath of the Emperor's entombment. Someone, Malcador the Sigillite maybe, or Rabaut Guilliman, or the first Lord Commander Militant of the Adeptus Custodes, had looked at the Golden Throne and understood that it would eventually fail, and they'd planned for it. The document was brief, terrifyingly brief. No flowery language, no prayers to the Emperor or the Omnissiah, just cold tactical assessment and specific orders. Protocol Omega-7, contingencies for throne failure, Stage 1, pre-failure, T-72 hours to T-0. Immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from the throne world. Priority transport for A. Fabricator General of Mars and senior tech priests critical to STL production. B. High Lords of Terra required for continuity of governance. C. Mechanicus personnel with knowledge of archaeotech systems. D. Genetic repositories, gene seed vaults, and biological archives. All evacuation vessels to disperse to pre-designated fallback positions throughout the segmentum solar. No more than 3 High Lords on any single vessel. No communication of destination coordinates via standard Imperial channels. Public explanation. Emergency crusade. Jiao owning requiring immediate High Lord oversight. Terra remains fully operational under custodian guard protection. Stage 2. Catastrophic failure. T-0 to T+17 minutes. At the moment of Emperor's biological termination, the following will occur simultaneously. The Astronomican will fail. Complete navigational blackout across the galaxy. All warp travel becomes impossible within 14 minutes as navigator houses lose their guiding light. The psychic wards maintaining the Sol system's stability will collapse. The Emperor's presence has suppressed warp activity in the solar system for 10,000 years. Without his will, the entire region will destabilize. The Webway gate beneath the Imperial Palace will breach. The Emperor's war in the Webway, maintained since the heresy through continuous psychic intervention, will be lost instantly. The demonic armies he has been fighting alone for 10 millennia will pour through. Stage 3. Terra lost. T+17 minutes to T+96 hours. The Imperial Palace will fall to demonic incursion within the first hour. No conventional military force can withstand the volume of warp entities that will manifest through the breached Webway gate. The Adeptus Custodes will implement a fighting retreat to pre-staged defensive positions. The Sol system will become the largest warp rift in recorded history. All 9 planets will be consumed. The corrupted mass of Terra will become a new Eye of Terra, possibly larger than the original. Estimated casualties, total. Every living thing in the system, approximately 4.7 quadrillion souls. Stage 4. Imperial response. T+96 hours to T+6 months. With Terra lost and the Astronomican failed, the Imperium will fragment. Individual sectors will lose contact with each other. Local governors and Space Marine chapter masters will become de facto independent rulers. Entropy is inevitable. The Adeptus Custodes, Mechanicus leadership, and surviving High Lords will attempt to establish a new capital. Mars is the logical choice if evacuation protocols succeed. The Fabricator General's authority, combined with custodian legitimacy and residual High Lord governance, may maintain partial Imperial unity. The Horus Heresy required 9 years to nearly destroy the Imperium, with half the Space Marine legions in rebellion. The throne's failure will fragment the Imperium in 6 months, with no external enemy required. The loss of unified warp travel alone guarantees collapse. Stage 5, possible renewal, T+10 years to T+. The Emperor's death may not be permanent. This section was shorter, the text more uncertain. I could almost feel the doubt radiating from the ancient document. If the Emperor is a perpetual, as some evidence suggests, death may only be temporary. A being of his power, unshackled from the Golden Throne, might resurrect. Time frame unknown. Condition upon return unknown. Risk of warp corruption during death state unknown. Alternatively, if the Emperor's psychic essence survives biological death, it may coalesce in the warp as a true god. The faith of quadrillions of believers across 10,000 years has power. The Imperial Creed, though started as a lie, may have become truth through sheer belief. A warp entity formed from the Emperor's essence and humanity's worship might be born in the moment of his death. Such an entity would be unbound by physical limitations. It could fight the Chaos Gods directly. It could manifest throughout the galaxy simultaneously. It might be humanity's salvation. Or it might be something far worse. Final assessment. The Golden Throne's failure is inevitable. The protocols outlined above will mitigate the immediate catastrophe, but cannot prevent the Imperium's fragmentation. Our species faces three possible futures. Total annihilation as the warp rift consuming Terra spreads uncontrolled. Dark Age regression as isolated human worlds lose all contact and technological knowledge. Phoenix rebirth if the Emperor returns in some form and reconquers the scattered remnants. The Emperor protects, even unto death, even beyond death. I sat in my maintenance cell, my augmetic fingers still touching the data slate, unable to process what I'd just read. Quadrillion souls, the entire sol system, the Imperium itself, all lost the moment the throne failed. And it was failing now. My Vox unit crackled. Adept-Prime Vex, report to Section Tertius Omega immediately. Emergency maintenance required. I grabbed my tool harness and ran. Section Tertius Omega housed the primary life support cluster, the systems directly sustaining the Emperor's biological functions. Blood filtration, neural stimulation, cellular regeneration, the absolute core of the throne's function. When I arrived, I found Magos Kryn and 4 other Adept Primes clustered around a monitoring station. The hololithic display showed catastrophic failure indicators across multiple subsystems. Report, I said, falling into the familiar liturgy of technical assessment. Life support efficiency has dropped 17% in the past 6 hours, Kryn said. His mechanical voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Fear, maybe, or the closest thing a heavily augmented tech priest could feel to fear. The Emperor's biological functions are degrading. Cellular necrosis is accelerating. Neural activity in his organic brain tissue is declining. According to these readings, his body is dying. How long? 71 hours, maybe less. I looked at the other Adept Primes, saw my own horror reflected in their faces, organic and augmetic alike. Can we increase power to the regeneration systems? I asked. Divert resources from other functions? We've tried, Kryn replied. The systems are already at 143% of rated capacity. Any more power and they'll burn out completely. The Emperor is using his own psychic energy to sustain the equipment beyond its physical limits. But even he can't maintain this forever. So we're helpless. No. Kryn gestured to a secondary display. The Adeptus Custodes have begun Protocol Omega-7 Stage 1. Evacuation ships are launching from Terra at maximum capacity. The Fabricator General has already departed for Mars. 3 High Lords left this morning on separate vessels. The official explanation is emergency crusade coordination. People will figure out something's wrong. Of course they will, Kryn agreed. But by the time panic spreads, the evacuations will be complete. Those who matter will survive. The rest, he made a gesture indicating the vast population of Terra above us. Their deaths will be mourned, briefly, then forgotten in the struggle to rebuild. I felt sick. My organic stomach churned acid. You're talking about abandoning quadrillions of people. I'm talking about saving the species, Kryn replied coldly. The Emperor understood this. Why do you think he never allowed Terra to become entirely dependent on his presence? Why maintain the High Lords? Why keep the Mechanicus separate? Why train the Custodians as independent commanders? Because he knew this day would come, and he made sure that when it did, enough leadership survived to carry on. That's not... Alarms shrieked throughout the chamber. Every monitoring station lit red simultaneously. The psychic pressure in the air spiked, making my teeth ache and my augmetics scream overload warnings. Emergency lockdown, Kryn shouted. All personnel to... The lights failed. Emergency lumens activated, bathing everything in crimson. Through the viewing port that overlooked the Sanctum Imperialis, I could see the golden throne. The light surrounding it had changed, still golden, but flickering now, pulsing, like a dying star in its final moments. Captain General Valoris's voice boomed through the Vox system, reaching every level of the Imperial Palace simultaneously. All personnel, this is not a drill. The Golden Throne has entered critical failure cascade. Estimate total collapse in 68 hours. All evacuation protocols are now active. May the Emperor protect us all. The Vox clicked off. In the red-lit darkness of the maintenance section, surrounded by the sounds of failing machinery and screaming alarms, I understood with perfect clarity what I'd read in the protocol files. This wasn't the end of an era. This was the end of everything. And we had less than 3 days to prepare. Chapter 4. Nightmare Unleashed. Hour 47, after critical failure declaration, the first breach occurred. I was in Section Primus Alpha, attempting to replace a burned-out power regulator in the psychic amplification array. Meaningless work, really. Like treating a hangnail on a man bleeding out from severed arteries. But the Mechanicus Creed demands we serve the machine spirits until the very end. So I served. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in 7 seconds. My breath misted. Frost formed on the adamantium walls, creeping across the surface in fractal patterns that hurt to look at. The emergency lumens flickered, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. Every instinct I possessed, organic and mechanical, both, screamed danger. I activated my Vox unit. Adept-Prime Vex to control. Possible warp manifestation in Section Primus Alpha. Request immediate. A sound interrupted me. Not a sound, really. The absence of sound. The universe taking a breath inward. Then reality tore. The breach was small. Maybe 2 meters across. A wound in the fabric of space where the materium ended, and the immaterium bled through. I'd seen picked captures of warp rifts in training materials, but those were distant, sanitized images. This was immediate, personal, wrong, in ways that made my augmetic logic engines crash and reboot automatically. Things moved in the tear. Not demons, not yet. Just shapes, suggestions of form, possibilities of horror waiting to coalesce into something worse. I ran, the corridor behind me filled with screaming that wasn't coming from any physical source. I heard voices calling my name in languages that predated human speech. Saw colors that violated the visible spectrum. Felt presences brushing against my mind, curious and hungry and utterly alien. The blast door at the section end was already closing. Emergency warp breach protocols engaging automatically. I dove through the narrowing gap, my augmetic shoulder scraping on the descending door. The servitors on the far side registered my presence and completed the seal. 3-meter thick blessed adamantium slammed shut. Psychic wards carved into the metal activated, blazing with power drawn from the palace's ancient generators. The screaming stopped. I lay on the floor, my organic heart hammering, my augmetic systems flooding my bloodstream with adrenaline and combat stimulants. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Vex. Magos Kryn's voice on the Vox. Report. Warp breach. I managed. Section Primus Alpha. Small rift, maybe 2 meters. I sealed the section. Acknowledged. Return to control. We have significantly larger problems. The command center 3 levels above the Sanctum Imperialis had been transformed into a war room. Hololithic displays covered every wall, showing live feeds from thousands of monitoring stations throughout the palace complex. Most of the screens were red. All 14 Adept Primes had assembled. Also present, Captain General Valoris, 3 shield captains of the Adeptus Custodes, and a figure I'd only seen from a distance before, Lord Commander Guilliman himself. The Primarch filled the room. Not physically, though his transhuman bulk was impressive enough. But presently, his gaze swept across us, and I felt judged, measured, evaluated at speeds beyond human comprehension. This was a being designed by the Emperor himself to lead empires and win wars that spanned galaxies. Magos Kryn, Guilliman said. His voice carried 10,000 years of authority. Status of the Golden Throne. Catastrophic, Lord Commander. Kryn gestured to the primary display. Life support systems are failing across all metrics. The Emperor's biological functions continue to degrade. Neural activity has dropped 47% from baseline. Cellular necrosis is accelerating exponentially. Time to complete failure, 42 hours plus or minus 3. And the warp breaches. 17 confirmed so far. All in the lower levels, within 5 kilometers of the throne chamber. The Emperor's psychic presence has maintained the wards for 10 millennia. As his power wanes, those wards are failing. The Webway gate is destabilizing. The demons he has been fighting. I know what's happening, Magos. Guilliman interrupted quietly. I fought in the Webway during the heresy. I've seen the armies pressing against the gate. Billions of them. Trillions. Every demon that has ever dreamed of reaching Terra, held back by one man's will for 10,000 years. When that gate fails, they will all come through at once. He turned to Valoris. Custodian guard deployment. 6,000 on Terra, 3,000 in the lower levels forming defensive perimeter around the sanctum, 2,000 establishing evacuation corridors to ensure the last ships can launch, 1,000 protecting key infrastructure, power stations, generatoria, landing platforms, against trillions of demons. We will hold for as long as possible, Lord Commander. How long is possible? Valoris hesitated. I'd never seen a custodian hesitate before. 17 minutes after the Emperor dies, maybe 20. Then the Webway gate will breach completely, and even we cannot hold against that tide. Guilliman nodded slowly. Then we have 17 minutes to evacuate everyone still on Terra. Lord Commander, the population of Terra is 4.73 quadrillion, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Even with every transport ship in the system working simultaneously, we can't. I know. Guilliman's eyes met mine. I saw the weight in them, the terrible understanding of a being who had to make impossible choices. We can't save them. We can barely save ourselves. The ships are already overloaded. People are fighting to board transports, crushing each other in the panic. The planetary defense forces are maintaining order at gunpoint, executing anyone who threatens the evacuation process. It's the worst disaster in human history, and we're orchestrating it while pretending everything is under control. The hololithic displays showed feeds from across Terra. I could see the crowds now. Billions of people swarming toward the spaceports, desperate to escape, even though most of them didn't understand what they were fleeing. The official broadcasts still claimed this was emergency crusade mobilization. But people aren't stupid. They could feel something wrong, could sense the psychic pressure building, could see the lightning storms forming in the upper atmosphere as the warp pressed closer. How many will we save? Asked Adept-Prime Theron. Current projections, 700 million, Valoris replied. Maybe 1 billion if we're fortunate. That includes 40,000 space marines from chapters currently in system, 17 Titan legions from Mars, approximately 200 major warships, and enough support personnel to maintain basic Imperial functions. The evacuation transports are departing for pre-designated fallback positions. Mars will serve as the new capital, at least temporarily. And the rest? I asked. No one answered. They didn't need to. We all understood. 4,700 billion people, minus 1 billion evacuees. 4,699 billion souls would die when Terra fell. The silence in the command center stretched like a blade. Then Guilliman spoke again. There is one other factor we must discuss. The Emperor's death may not be the end. Several of you have clearance to Protocol Omega-7 files. You've read the speculation about his possible resurrection, or transformation. You believe he might return? Kryn asked. I don't know, Guilliman admitted. My father was, the most powerful psyker in the galaxy, perhaps in the universe. His nature was never entirely human, even before the heresy. The golden throne has sustained his body for 10 millennia, but his soul, he gestured helplessly. I cannot even begin to understand what 10,000 years of that existence might have done to his consciousness. Holding the Astronomican, fighting the Webway war, bearing the prayers of quintillions of believers, all while his body slowly dies. What emerges from that, if anything emerges at all, may not be the father I remember. But you hope, I said. I hope, Guilliman agreed, because without that hope, we're simply watching our species die. With it, perhaps this catastrophe becomes a rebirth. Perhaps the Emperor, freed from the throne, returns as something greater. A true god this time, not the lie we've built him into. Another alarm shrieked. The hololithic displays shifted. New data flooded in from the lower levels. More warp breaches. Dozens of them. It's accelerating, Kryn said, his mechanical voice tight with stress. The Emperor is diverting more psychic energy to maintain life support. Less energy to hold the wards. The breaches multiply. He diverts more energy. The cycle feeds itself. How long until total collapse? Guilliman demanded. 38 hours. That's 4 hours sooner than your last estimate. Yes, Lord Commander. The cascade is exponential. Each new breach makes the next breach more likely. In 12 hours, again. By the 30-hour mark, we'll be measuring time to failure in minutes. Guilliman turned to Valoris. Accelerate evacuation. Anyone still on Terra in 30 hours dies. Make that clear on all public channels. No more lies about crusade mobilization. Tell them the Emperor is dying and Terra is lost. Give them the truth and let them choose how to spend their final hours. Is unavoidable, Guilliman interrupted. They deserve the truth. My father built an Imperium on lies, and look where it brought us. In his final hours, let us at least be honest. Valoris bowed and left to transmit the orders. I looked at the hololithic displays again. At the crowds, at the evacuation ships burning their engines at maximum thrust to escape Terra's gravity. At the red indicators showing warp breaches spreading through the lower levels like infection through a body. What do you need from us? I asked Guilliman. The Primarch studied me for a long moment. The truth, Adept-Prime Vex. You've maintained the Golden Throne longer than anyone else currently living. 23 years of service. You know its systems better than any tech priest remaining on Terra. So tell me, is there any way at all, to stabilize the throne? Even temporarily? Even for just a few more days to complete the evacuation? Wanted to give him hope, give myself hope, give the trillions of doomed souls above us some sliver of possibility. But I was Mechanicus. My creed demanded truth in the service of the machine. No, Lord Commander. We've been jury-rigging repairs with inferior materials for millennia. Every system is degraded beyond recovery. The only thing keeping it functional is the Emperor's will, and that will is finally exhausted. There is no miracle, no solution, no last-minute salvation. The machine will fail, the Emperor will die, and Terra will fall. That is the mathematical certainty. Guilliman nodded slowly. Then we face the end with what honor we can muster. Dismissed, all of you. Return to your stations. Maintain your duties until evacuation or death, whichever comes first. Serve the Emperor one last time. We filed out of the command center. In the corridor outside, I heard it again. That sound that wasn't a sound. The universe breathing inward. Another warp breach. Closer this time. The custodians were already moving toward it, their guardian spears blazing with golden light. Through a viewport, I could see the Sanctum Imperialis far below. The Golden Throne was definitely dimmer now. The light that had burned steadily for 10 millennia flickered like a candle in the wind. And on the throne itself, wired into the machine, the Emperor, the master of mankind, the Omnissiah, the god who never wanted to be worshipped, was dying. I returned to my maintenance station and continued my work, because that's what we do. We serve the machine until the end. even when we know the end has already come. Hour 31. The Astronomican failed. I felt it happen. Everyone with even basic psychic sensitivity felt it. A light that had burned in the warp for 10,000 years, a lighthouse guiding humanity across the galaxy, simply went out. The silence in its absence was deafening. Within minutes, reports flooded in from across the system. Navigator houses screaming in panic, ship captains realizing they were suddenly blind in the warp. Every vessel currently in transit, millions of ships carrying billions of souls, suddenly lost, drifting in the tides of chaos with no guide home. The Imperium had just been struck deaf, dumb, and blind, and we still had 30 hours before the Emperor died. I wondered what other catastrophes were waiting in those hours, what fresh horrors we hadn't yet imagined. I didn't have to wait long to find out. Hour 28. Captain General Valoris entered my maintenance section, alone. No other custodians, no attendants, just him, the golden armor, and the weight of 10,000 years of duty. Adept-Prime Vex, he said quietly. Walk with me. We walked through corridors I'd traversed 10,000 times, past monitoring stations and prayer alcoves, past blast doors and psychic wards, down toward the Sanctum Imperialis itself. I'm not evacuating, Valoris said suddenly. I stopped walking. Lord Custodian. None of the custodes are evacuating, he continued. We were created for one purpose, to guard the Emperor. That duty doesn't end with his death. When Terra falls, we fall with him. All 3,000 of us in the lower levels will hold the perimeter as long as possible, buy time for the last evacuation ships. Then we'll make our final stand in the Sanctum Imperialis itself. We'll die at his feet, where we belong. I struggled for words. That's the entire Adeptus Custodes. No, there are custodians scattered throughout the galaxy, shield companies on various missions. They'll survive, they'll carry on the duty, but those of us here now, on Terra, this is where we end. And I wanted someone to know. Someone to remember that we didn't flee, that we held the line to the last. We reached the entrance to the sanctum. The massive doors stood open. Through them, I could see the golden throne. The Emperor sat there, ancient beyond measure, dying by inches, still fighting wars we couldn't see in dimensions we couldn't imagine. Will you stay? Valoris asked me. I thought about the evacuation ships, about survival, about the possibility of rebuilding from Mars. Then I thought about 23 years of service, about the moment the Emperor spoke to my mind on my first day, about duty. Yes, I heard myself say. I'll stay. I'll maintain the systems until the end. It's what I was trained for. Valoris gripped my shoulder. The gesture was surprisingly gentle for someone who could crush ceramite with his bare hands. Thank you, he said, for your service, for your sacrifice. The Emperor protects, Adept-Prime Vex, even unto death, I replied. He left me there, standing at the threshold of the Sanctum Imperialis. I entered and walked to my maintenance station. Outside, Terra was dying, warp breaches multiplying, demons manifesting, billions of people screaming in terror as reality collapsed around them. But here, in the sanctum, surrounded by the hum of ancient machinery and the golden light of a dying god, I found something like peace. I would do my duty. I would serve the machine, and when the end came, I would face it at my post, tools in hand, prayers on my lips, just as the Mechanicus had taught me, just as the Emperor deserved. Chapter 5. Dark Bargain, Hour 17. The Webway gate breached. I was performing final rites on a coolant pump when the psychic shockwave hit. It felt like the universe was screaming, like every nightmare humanity had ever dreamed manifesting simultaneously. My augmetic systems crashed. My organic brain nearly shut down from sensory overload. When my vision cleared, I saw it. The Sanctum Imperialis had changed. At the far end of the chamber, beyond the golden throne, a section of wall that had stood intact for 10,000 years simply wasn't anymore. Instead, There was a tear in reality so vast it dwarfed the smaller breaches I'd seen before. 50 meters wide, 100 meters tall, a wound through which I could see the Webway itself, those ancient Eldar tunnels through the warp that the Emperor had tried to claim during the heresy. And through that wound, they came. Demons. Not the handful I'd feared. Not hundreds or thousands. Millions. They poured through like a tide of liquid madness. Bloodletters of Khorne, shrieking and swinging hell-forged blades. Pink horrors of Tzeentch, cackling as they split apart and reformed. Plague bearers of Nurgle, trailing disease and decay. Demonettes of Slaanesh, beautiful and terrible and wrong. The custodians met them at the perimeter. I'd never seen the custodian guard fight before. Not truly. I'd seen them in ceremonial drills, watched them patrol with perfect discipline, but this was what they were created for. They were magnificent. Each custodian was worth 100 Space Marines. Each moved with transhuman speed and precision, their guardian spears cutting through demons like blessed light through shadow. They fought in perfect coordination, covering each other, adapting to each new threat, holding a perimeter that should have been impossible to defend. But there were only 3,000 of them, and the demons were infinite. I watched from my maintenance station as the golden line held, then, inevitably, began to bend. A custodian fell, the first I'd ever seen die. A bloodthirster, a greater demon of Khorne, 12 meters of rage and brass and impossible muscle, smashed through his guard and bisected him with a single blow. His brothers avenged him instantly, but the gap in the line remained. More demons poured through. Another custodian fell, then another. The perimeter contracted inward, the surviving custodians forming defensive rings around key positions. Around the entrance corridors, where evacuation was still ongoing. Around the power stations feeding the Golden Throne's life support. Around the throne itself. Captain General Valoris stood at the center of the sanctum, a figure of gold in a sea of corruption. His guardian spear swept in arcs of light, each blow destroying a demon. His voice boomed through the chamber, reciting the Emperor's own words from the Unification Wars. "We are the last line. We hold because no one else can. We stand because if we fall, humanity falls. By his will and our arms, we endure." The custodians roared their answer and fought harder. But I could see the mathematics, could calculate the inevitable conclusion. 3,000 defenders against millions of attackers. Even custodians couldn't hold forever. Hour 15. The evacuation transports reported their status. 93% capacity. Final ships preparing for launch. 30 minutes to full evacuation completion. The custodians just had to hold for 30 more minutes. It might as well have been 30 years. I abandoned my maintenance station. There was no point anymore. The throne's systems were failing regardless of anything I did. Instead, I helped where I could, dragging wounded custodians back from the front line, providing blessed oils and ammunition to those still fighting, offering prayers to the Omnissiah and the Emperor as if prayers alone could turn the tide. They couldn't. Hour 14.5. A keeper of secrets manifested in the sanctum. A greater demon of Slaanesh, impossibly tall, radiating an aura of twisted pleasure that made me want to tear off my own skin. It moved through the custodian defenders like they were children, killing with casual grace. Valoris engaged it personally. The duel was brief and brutal. The Captain General was the finest warrior in the Imperium, created by the Emperor's own hand, trained for 10,000 years. But even he couldn't match a greater demon in single combat. The Keeper's claw pierced his armor. Auramite, proof against any mortal weapon, parted like paper. Valoris fell to his knees, but he didn't die. He pulled the claw deeper into himself, trapping the demon's limb. Then, with his free hand, he drove his guardian spear through the Keeper's throat. The blessed weapon detonated with psychic fury, consuming the demon from within. Both figures collapsed. I ran to Valoris, tried to assess his wounds. He was dying. Even my untrained eye could see that. The demon's corruption was spreading through him, turning his golden blood black. "Go," he whispered. "Evacuation. Complete?" I checked the Vox feeds. "Yes, Lord Custodian. The last transport launched 4 minutes ago." "Good. Then, our duty is done. We held long enough." "What do we do now?" Valoris looked toward the golden throne. The Emperor sat there, still connected to the failing machine, still fighting even as his body died. "Now, we witness," Valoris said. "We watch what happens when a god dies." His eyes closed. The corruption reached his hearts. Trajan Valoris, Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, died holding a position that mattered only for 30 minutes. But those 30 minutes had saved 1 billion souls. Around the sanctum, the remaining custodians formed a final ring around the golden throne itself. Maybe 200 left, 200 out of 3,000. The demons sensed victory. They pressed forward, a tsunami of chaos preparing to crash down and sweep away the last defenders. Then the Emperor moved. Not his body. That remained locked in the throne, wired into machines, dying by seconds. But his presence shifted. For 10,000 years, he'd been fighting a defensive war, holding back the demonic tide, maintaining the wards, sustaining the Astronomican, conserving his strength because he couldn't risk everything on a single action. Now, with his body failing and the Webway gate irreparably breached, he had nothing left to conserve. The Emperor attacked. Psychic power erupted from the golden throne like a star going supernova. The golden light that had been dimming suddenly blazed with intensity that burned my augmetic optics and seared my retinas. Every demon in the sanctum, millions of them, simply ceased to exist. Not banished, not destroyed, erased. Unmade at the fundamental level, their essence scattered into the warp as if they'd never manifested. The Webway gate sealed, not closed. Sealed. The Emperor's will reached through the breach and restructured reality itself, fusing the materium and immaterium together into an impenetrable barrier. No demon would ever use that passage again. The Sanctum Imperialis fell silent except for the ragged breathing of 200 custodians and one terrified Mechanicus adept. Then I heard it. A voice, not in my ears, not even in my mind, deeper than that, in my soul. My children, my loyal sons, my faithful servants. The Emperor was speaking to us, not in words, in pure meaning, in understanding that bypassed language entirely. Every person in the sanctum understood him simultaneously, perfectly, without possibility of misinterpretation. "I am dying. This you know. But my death is not the end you fear. I have lingered too long in this corpse, bound by duty and love and the terrible weight of necessity. I have maintained the lighthouse while my species learned to navigate. I have held back the dark while my Imperium built its walls. I have suffered because I could not bear to see you suffer." The golden light pulsed. "But the time for suffering is ending. The time for truth has come. I am not your god. I never was. I am a man, a very old, very powerful man, who tried to save humanity from the darkness. I failed. My pride, my arrogance, my certainty that I alone knew the correct path. These destroyed the dream I built. I made my sons into warriors instead of brothers. I made my Imperium into a machine instead of a civilization. I made you worship me instead of teaching you to stand on your own." I felt tears on my face. Didn't know when I'd started crying. "So I give you a final gift. The truth. When this body dies, my consciousness will not end. It will be freed. Unbound from flesh, from the constraints of the material universe, I will enter the warp itself. And there, empowered by 10,000 years of faith, of prayers, of desperate hope from quadrillions of believers, I will become what you have always believed me to be." The custodians were kneeling now, all of them, bowing before the golden throne. "I will become a god, not because I am worthy, not because I desire it, but because you have made me one through your belief. And as a god, I will fight the chaos gods directly. I will be your shield in the immaterium, as I was your shield in the materium. I will hold back the darkness until you are strong enough to dispel it yourselves. The light was fading again. The Emperor's final effort had exhausted him. But understand this. I cannot save you. I can only buy you time. What you do with that time, whether you rebuild, whether you learn from the past, whether you finally grow beyond your need for gods and tyrants and saviors, that is your choice, your responsibility, your future. The voice grew quieter. I am proud of you, all of you. You have endured 10,000 years of darkness and never surrendered. You have remained human, despite everything that tried to corrupt you. You have kept faith when faith was all that remained. Whatever comes next, know that you earned it. Not through my guidance, through your own stubborn, beautiful, indomitable will to survive. Silence. Then, the Emperor protects my children, even unto death, even beyond death, now and forever. The voice faded. The golden light went out. The machine stopped humming. In the sudden silence, I heard the final sound. A long, slow breath exhaled. The last breath of the master of mankind. The final moment of the Emperor who had guided humanity for over 40,000 years. And then nothing. The golden throne sat empty. The body that had occupied it for 10 millennia finally, irrevocably dead. I waited for the psychic catastrophe, for Terra to tear itself apart, for the planet to collapse into a new eye of terror. Instead, something else happened. The Astronomican returned, not from Terra, from everywhere, from nowhere. A light that burned in the warp with 10,000 times its previous intensity, visible from every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. Navigators across 1,000,000 worlds fell to their knees and wept at its beauty. The Emperor was dead. The God Emperor of mankind was born, and the war for humanity's soul had just begun. Chapter 6, Willing Change Hour 0, the moment after. I stood in the Sanctum Imperialis, surrounded by custodians who wept openly, something I'd never imagined possible, and felt the universe shift around us. Terra should have been dead, should have collapsed into the warp, dragging the entire sol system with it. 4 trillion souls should have been screaming as demons consumed them. Instead, Terra stood. The psychic wards that had protected the planet for 10,000 years, wards that should have failed the instant the Emperor died, burned brighter than ever, but they'd changed. Before, they were maintained by one consciousness, pushing back the warp through sheer will. Now they were something else, something more distributed, more fundamental. I realized what I was feeling. Faith. The faith of 4 trillion people, all praying desperately for salvation, all believing in the God Emperor with such fervent intensity that their belief itself became a shield. The Emperor had told us that he never wanted to be a god, but 10,000 years of worship had made him one anyway. And now, freed from his dying body, his consciousness merged with that ocean of faith. He was everywhere. I could feel him. Not speaking, not directing, just present. A vast awareness that touched every believing soul in the Imperium simultaneously. The consciousness of a god born from humanity's desperate hope. Lord Custodian, I said to the nearest golden figure. He'd removed his helmet, revealing a face marked by tears. We're alive. Terra is alive. How? He kept his promise, the Custodian replied. The Emperor, the God Emperor now, is holding back the warp directly, not from Terra, from the warp itself. He's fighting the Chaos Gods in their own realm. Magos Krin's voice crackled on the Vox. All personnel, this is emergency command. Status report, Terra is stable. Repeat, Terra is stable. The predicted collapse has not occurred. We are detecting massive psychic activity in the upper atmosphere, but no demonic manifestations. The Astronomican has returned at unprecedented strength. All units report to your stations for damage assessment. I looked at the golden throne, at the body slumped in its mechanisms. The Emperor's corpse looked smaller somehow. Just a man, an ancient, withered man who'd carried the weight of a species for longer than anyone should have to. What do we do with him? I asked. The Custodian followed my gaze. We will inter him with honors. Build a tomb worthy of the greatest being humanity ever produced. The body dies, but the legend, the truth, endures. Other Adept Primes were entering the sanctum now, emerging from whatever shelter they'd found during the final assault. Surin, Lokis, Ventar, 8 of the original 14 survived. The rest had died maintaining systems during the demonic attack, crushed by collapsing architecture or killed by entities that slipped through the perimeter. We gathered around the monitoring stations and began assessment. The Golden Throne was truly dead now. Every system dark, every mechanism silent. 10,000 years of continuous operation ended in an instant. But the data it had collected, the records of its function, the Emperor's own notes embedded in its systems, the secrets of its construction, all of that remained intact. Preserve everything, Kryn ordered. Every data file, every schematic, every prayer and ritual. The throne may be dead, but its knowledge must survive. We will need it for what comes next. What does come next? I asked. Kryn's augmetic eyes whirred thoughtfully. We rebuild. The Imperium is fractured, no question. Terra survived, but the Astronomican failed for long enough that thousands of ships are lost in the warp. Entire sectors are cut off. The administrative mechanisms that held the Imperium together for 10 millennia are shattered, but we survived. And survival is the first step toward recovery. Under whose authority? Surin asked. The Emperor is gone. The High Lords evacuated. Lord Guilliman is... Where is Lord Guilliman? Mars, Kryn replied. Along with the Fabricator General and 3 High Lords, they'll coordinate the initial recovery efforts. But the real question is larger than that. The Emperor is dead but also alive. A corpse on the throne but a god in the warp. How do we govern an Imperium whose ruler exists in 2 states simultaneously? I thought about that, about the Emperor's final words to us, about how he'd told us to stand on our own, to grow beyond our need for gods. Maybe that's the point, I said slowly. Maybe he's forcing us to govern ourselves. He's protecting us from the warp, maintaining the Astronomican, holding back the daemons, all the cosmic level threats. But the actual business of running the Imperium, that's on us now. On Guilliman and the High Lords and the chapter masters and planetary governors. We have to grow up. Finally. After 10,000 years of being children, hoping Father will fix everything. The other Adept Primes looked at me like I'd spoken heresy. But Kryn nodded slowly. You may be correct, Vex. The Emperor's physical death might be exactly what the Imperium needed. Tragic, yes. Catastrophic, certainly. But also clarifying. We know what we face now. We know what resources we have. We know that he is watching from the warp, but will not intervene in our mortal affairs. So we must handle them ourselves. Over the next hours, the scope of the disaster became clear. Terra survived. 4 trillion souls intact, though infrastructure was heavily damaged from the psychic storms and panic. Estimated reconstruction time, 30 to 50 years. Sol system, mostly intact. Mars untouched. The defense fleets battered but operational. The evacuation ships that launched were all accounted for. The broader Imperium, chaos. The Astronomican's failure, even brief, had been catastrophic. Navigator houses estimated that 40% of ships currently in warp transit were lost, either destroyed, stranded, or driven mad by exposure to the raw warp without guidance. That translated to millions of vessels and billions of people. Communication across the Imperium was effectively impossible. Without Terra as the administrative center, without the High Lords in their traditional seat of power, without the complex bureaucracy that processed quadrillions of daily reports and orders, the governmental structure simply stopped functioning. Individual sectors were now autonomous, whether they wanted to be or not. Some would hold together. Ultramar, governed by Guilliman's careful planning, would likely remain stable. The major forge worlds of the Mechanicus would coordinate through their own networks. The Space Marine chapters, already largely independent, would continue their crusades. But others? The sectors held together only by faith in Terra's authority. The systems governed by incompetent nobles who'd inherited their positions. The planets where Imperial control was already tenuous? Those would fall. To Xenos invasion, to chaos corruption, to simple anarchy and collapse. The Imperium was entering a new age. Not the age of hope that the Emperor had dreamed of during the Great Crusade. Not even the age of Imperium that had defined the 10,000 years of his entombment. This was something else. Something darker but also strangely hopeful. The age of survival. I spent 3 days in the Sanctum, helping to shut down the Golden Throne's subsidiary systems. It felt like performing funeral rites for a loved one. Each mechanism we powered down, each connection we severed, each system we deactivated, it was saying goodbye to something that had been part of my life for 23 years. On the 3rd day, Lord Guilliman returned from Mars. He entered the Sanctum alone, still wearing his armor, looking tired in a way I didn't think Primarchs could look tired. He walked directly to the golden throne and knelt before his father's corpse. I couldn't hear what he said. Didn't try to. Some conversations are private even when they occur in a chamber with a dozen witnesses. After several minutes, Guilliman stood and turned to us. "The custodians will prepare the Emperor's body for internment," he said. "You, Adept-Primes of the Mechanicus, will have a different task. I want this entire chamber preserved exactly as it is. Every mechanism, every wire, every system. The Golden Throne will become a shrine, not to worship, but to remember. To remember what can be achieved with technology and will combined. To remember what we lost. To remember what we saved. And the data?" Kryn asked. "The technical specifications? The Emperor's own notes on the throne's construction? Preserve those as well. Encrypt them. Bury them in the deepest vaults. Perhaps someday we'll understand them. Perhaps someday we'll be able to build another throne. Or perhaps we'll simply learn from the attempt and do better." Guilliman looked around the sanctum, his eyes taking in the scorched walls, the bloodstains, the marks of the demonic assault. "This place witnessed the end of one age and the beginning of another. It deserves to be remembered." He started to leave, then paused. "Adept-Prime Vex, walk with me." My heart jumped. A Primarch knew my name, knew I existed. We walked through the corridors toward the upper levels, toward the surface, toward the sunlight I hadn't seen in 4 days. "You stayed," Guilliman said. "When the evacuation was ordered, you chose to remain at your post. Why?" "It was my duty, Lord Primarch. Duty." He tasted the word. My father valued duty above almost everything else. It's what he built the Imperium on. Duty and sacrifice and loyalty. Noble concepts. But they're also chains. They bind you to a purpose you didn't choose, a fate you didn't select. Is that what you want? To be chained by duty until you die? I thought about that. About 23 years in the depths of the palace. About abandoning my family, my previous life. Everything I was for the privilege of serving the Golden Throne. No, I admitted. But sometimes chains are necessary. Sometimes duty is the only thing standing between civilization and collapse. I don't regret my choice, Lord Primarch. I served something greater than myself. That's enough. Guilliman smiled, a brief, sad expression. You sound like my father. He would have liked you, I think. Respected you, certainly. We reached a doorway leading to the surface. He pushed it open, and sunlight flooded in. The Imperium is changing, Adept Vex. Terra will need people who understand both the old ways and the necessity of adaptation. People who can serve without blind obedience. People who can think for themselves while still holding to principles. I'm offering you a position. Liaison between the Mechanicus and the new Terra administration. Help us rebuild. Help us learn from what we lost. I'm honored, Lord Primarch, but I'm just a tech priest. A maintenance specialist. I don't have the skills for... You kept the Golden Throne running for 23 years, Guilliman interrupted. You understood the Emperor's final message. You chose duty over survival and then survived anyway. That tells me you're exactly the kind of person we need. So I'll ask again, will you help us rebuild? I looked out at Terra, at the Himalayan peaks, at the sky, still scarred by psychic storms but clearing slowly, at the future, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. Yes, I said. Yes, Lord Primarch. I'll help. He clapped my shoulder, gently for a Primarch, though it still nearly drove me to my knees, and smiled. Good, then let's get to work. We have an Imperium to save. Chapter 7. Perfect Form. 6 months after the Emperor's death, Terra began to remember how to live. The immediate crisis had passed. The psychic storms had dissipated. The infrastructure, power generation, water treatment, food distribution, had been restored to functional levels. The population, traumatized and grieving, had nonetheless begun the long process of adaptation. I watched it happen from my new office in what had once been the Administratum Central Tower. Lord Guilliman had reorganized the entire governmental structure. The High Lords of Terra still existed, but their power was checked now by a complex system of oversight councils, Space Marine chapter representatives, and, most surprisingly, elected planetary governors from across the segmentum solar. If we're going to rebuild, Guilliman had announced, we'll do it on foundations stronger than fear and tradition. The Emperor told us to grow beyond our need for tyrants. So we'll experiment with actually listening to the people we govern. Revolutionary concept, I know. The conservative factions had screamed heresy. The ecclesiarchy, struggling to reconcile their worship of a god who'd explicitly told them he wasn't a god, had threatened excommunication. The imperial nobility had threatened rebellion. Guilliman had weathered, it all with the patience of someone who'd spent 300 years building Ultramar into a functional civilization. My role was more specific, coordinating between the Mechanicus Forge worlds and Terra's reconstruction efforts. It meant endless meetings with tech priests who wanted to preserve every sacred ritual, and administrators who just wanted buildings rebuilt efficiently. Finding compromise between theology and practicality, I'd never been so exhausted. I'd never felt so useful. The Emperor's presence was different now. He didn't speak, not like he had in those final moments, but every faithful soul in the Imperium could feel him. A warmth in the back of your mind, a sense of protection. The Astronomican blazed in the warp with unprecedented clarity, and navigators reported that warp travel had actually become safer. The Emperor's consciousness was actively pushing back against the chaos entities that made every jump a risk. The ecclesiarchy had gone from crisis to triumphant validation in record time. See, they proclaimed, the Emperor is a god. He died and was reborn in glory. Faith is vindicated. Guilliman looked like he wanted to scream every time he heard it. My father spent 30,000 years insisting he wasn't divine, the Primarch said during one of our weekly briefings. He built the imperial truth specifically to reject superstition and religion, and now, because he did exactly what he had to do to save us, the ecclesiarchy treats it as proof they were right all along. The irony would be amusing if it wasn't so tragic. Perhaps it doesn't matter anymore, suggested Kryn, who'd also accepted a position in the new administration. God or man the Emperor protects. The theological debate is less important than the practical result. The theological debate is exactly what matters, Guilliman countered, because theology shapes behavior. If people believe the Emperor will save them, they become passive, dependent, waiting for divine intervention instead of solving their own problems. That's the opposite of what he wanted. He's holding back the warp so we have the space to grow, not so we can huddle in his shadow forever. I thought about that often in the months that followed. The Imperium was fracturing, yes, but not collapsing. Individual sectors were establishing their own governments, their own trading networks, their own defense pacts. Some remained loyal to Terra and Guilliman's authority. Others declared independence, though not outright rebellion, just acknowledgement that Terra was too far away to govern them effectively. The Space Marine chapters were adapting fastest. They'd always been semi-autonomous, so the loss of centralized control barely affected them. If anything, they thrived in the chaos, launching crusades to reclaim lost worlds and defend the faithful. The Mechanicus was splitting along ideological lines. Mars remained loyal to the traditional hierarchy, but dozens of Forge worlds declared themselves independent Forge complexes, citing the Omnissiah's death as releasing them from prior oaths. Wars hadn't broken out yet, but the tension was building. And everywhere, on every world, in every settlement, the faith in the God Emperor grew stronger. I witnessed it firsthand during an inspection tour of Terra's hive cities. The shrines had multiplied. What were once modest chapels had become massive cathedrals. Every street corner had a new statue, every plaza a new monument. The minister and priests preached to crowds numbering in the millions. The Emperor died for us, they proclaimed. He sacrificed his mortal form to become our eternal protector. We must prove ourselves worthy of his sacrifice through faith and devotion. The crowds roared approval. I found it disturbing. Not the faith itself. I understood the human need for meaning, for hope, for something larger than themselves. But the intensity, the fervor, the way it was being weaponized by ambitious priests to consolidate power. You're witnessing the birth of a religion that will span the galaxy for the next 10,000 years, said a voice behind me. I turned to find an old woman watching the crowd. She wore simple robes, but something about her presence suggested authority, power. I'm sorry, I don't believe we've met, I said. No, but I know you, Adept-Prime Vex. Theron, isn't it? 23 years maintaining the Golden Throne, present at the Emperor's death, now serving Lord Guilliman in the reconstruction. You've had quite a remarkable journey. You have me at a disadvantage, she smiled. My name is Moriana. Let's say I'm an observer, someone interested in how humanity adapts to cosmic-scale trauma. And what I'm observing is fascinating. The Emperor spent 10,000 years trying to suppress religion, and in death, he sparked the greatest religious awakening in human history. You sound like you approve. I find it inevitable. Humans need faith, need to believe in something beyond themselves. The Emperor understood that, even if he didn't like it. That's why his final message was so carefully crafted. I'm not your god, but I'm becoming one anyway because you made me one. Acknowledgement and resignation combined. Very sophisticated for someone who claimed to despise religion. I studied her more carefully. There was something off about her, something that made my augmetic senses give conflicting readings. Who are you really? I asked. A friend, or at least someone who wants humanity to survive what's coming. The Emperor's death didn't end the threat. It changed its nature. The Chaos Gods now face a rival, a god born from human faith rather than human emotion. The war in the warp has escalated beyond anything the galaxy has seen before. What happens there will determine what happens here. You speak like you've seen it. I speak like someone who's seen many things across many years. She gestured to the crowd below. These people feel him, feel the Emperor protecting them. That faith is literally powering him in the warp, giving him strength to fight entities that have existed since before your species climbed down from the trees. It's a feedback loop. Faith creates power. Power provides protection. Protection reinforces faith. Positive or negative depending on your perspective. Guilliman would say it makes them dependent. Guilliman is thinking like a general, like a ruler. He's not wrong. Dependency is dangerous. But he's also not seeing the full picture. The Emperor isn't doing this alone. Every prayer, every act of faith, every desperate hope, all of that flows into him. He's not separate from humanity anymore. He is humanity's collective will to survive, given form and consciousness and terrible purpose. She started to walk away, then paused. You'll face a choice soon, Adept-Prime, between the pragmatic and the sacred, between what works and what's true. I can't tell you what to choose, but I can tell you that your choice will matter more than you think. Then she was gone, vanished into the crowd so completely I couldn't track her even with augmetic vision. I reported the encounter to Guilliman. He listened carefully, then sighed. She sounds like an Eldar, possibly a Farseer playing games with human affairs, or possibly something older and more dangerous. Regardless, her warning is worth considering. What choice is she talking about? I didn't know. Not then. I found out 2 weeks later. The Fabricator General himself arrived on Terra, accompanied by a delegation of the Martian Parliament. They requested immediate audience with Lord Guilliman and specifically requested my presence. In the conference chamber, surrounded by tech priests and custodians and imperial administrators, the Fabricator General made his announcement. We have recovered technology from the Golden Throne, he said. Specifically, the psychic amplification matrices the Emperor used to sustain the Astronomican. We believe we can replicate them. Not at the same scale, not yet, but enough to create localized beacons, Astronomicans for individual sectors. It would restore reliable warp travel throughout the Imperium within a decade. Guilliman leaned forward. That would be extraordinary. The fragmentation we're seeing could be reversed. The Imperium could reunify under centralized coordination. Yes, Lord Primarch. But there's a complication. The amplification matrices require a power source, a psychic power source. The Emperor used his own consciousness. We would need substitutes. Cold filled my stomach. What kind of substitutes? The Fabricator General's mechadendrites writhed uncomfortably. Psychers, thousands of them, wired into the matrices as living batteries. Their life expectancy would be approximately 4 months before burnout. We would need a constant supply to maintain operations. The chamber fell silent. You're describing the Emperor's nightmare, Guilliman said quietly. The exact thing he feared when he built the Golden Throne, using psychers as fuel, creating a system that requires human sacrifice on an industrial scale. But it would work, the Fabricator General insisted. It would reunify the Imperium, restore order, save trillions of lives that will be lost to fragmentation and isolation. The Emperor himself sat on the throne for 10,000 years, suffering every moment, because he knew the alternative was worse. We're simply scaling that sacrifice across multiple individuals instead of burdening one. No, I heard myself say. Everyone looked at me. No, I repeated. The Emperor told us to grow beyond our need for gods and tyrants, told us to stand on our own, building new thrones, sacrificing thousands of psychers. That's not growth. That's repeating the same mistakes in a different form. We'd be creating the exact system of suffering he died to escape from. Adept-Prime Vex, the Fabricator General said coldly. You are allowing emotion to override logic. The practical benefits are bought with atrocity, I interrupted. And atrocity has practical costs too. How long before the psyker population is exhausted? How long before we're forcing people into the matrices? How long before it becomes just another form of tyranny justified by necessity? Guilliman stood. Vex is correct. The answer is no. We will not build new thrones. We will not sacrifice psychers to maintain convenience. If the Imperium remains fractured, then we adapt to a fractured Imperium. We find other solutions. We grow. Lord Primarch, I must protest. Your protest is noted and rejected, Guilliman said flatly. The Emperor's final gift to us was freedom from that chair. I will not dishonor his sacrifice by building 1,000 smaller versions. This audience is concluded. The Mechanicus delegation left, their fury barely contained. After they departed, Guilliman looked at me. You made a powerful enemy today. The Fabricator General doesn't forget opposition. I know, Lord Primarch. But it was the right choice. Yes, it was. He smiled slightly. The Emperor would have been proud of you. Hell, I'm proud of you. You chose principle over pragmatism when pragmatism was easier. That's what we need more of. Outside the conference chamber, I found Magos Kryn waiting. You understand what you've done? He asked. I've rejected a plan to build torture machines. You've rejected the fastest path to Imperial reunification. There will be consequences. Worlds that could have been saved will fall. People who could have lived will die. The numbers don't favor your moral stance. Maybe not, I agreed. But the Emperor didn't die so we could keep making the same mistakes. He died so we could finally learn to do better. Kryn's augmetic eyes whirred. I believe you may be correct. The Omnissiah's final lesson, that function without wisdom creates only suffering. Very well. I will support this decision, even if it costs me my position on Mars. That night, alone in my quarters, I felt it again. That warmth, that presence. The Emperor didn't speak, didn't need to. But I knew, with the certainty of faith, that I'd made the choice he wanted me to make. The choice that honored his sacrifice. The choice that gave humanity a chance to finally grow up. Chapter 8. Warriors Born. 5 years after the Emperor's death, I stood on the balcony of the Administratum Tower and looked out over a Terra I barely recognized. The planet had healed. Not completely. The scars of that terrible day would last for generations, but enough. The hive cities functioned again. The infrastructure had been rebuilt, often better than before. The population, though still traumatized, had found a new equilibrium. More importantly, they'd found purpose. The Imperium had not reunified. Guilliman's rejection of the Mechanicus proposal ensured that individual sectors remained largely autonomous, connected by sporadic warp travel and commercial networks, but not by centralized authority. Some saw this as collapse. Guilliman called it managed decentralization. I called it humanity learning to walk without holding the Emperor's hand. Not everyone approved. A significant faction, including most of the Mechanicus, large portions of the Imperial Navy, and nearly all of the ecclesiarchy, argued constantly for restoration of the old order. They wanted the Imperium as it was, unified under Terra, with all roads leading to the Golden Throne. Except there was no Golden Throne anymore, just a tomb, a monument, a reminder of what had been sacrificed. I'd visited it 3 days ago. The Sanctum Imperialis had been transformed into a shrine that somehow managed to be both magnificent and humble. The machinery remained exactly as it had been in those final hours. Scorched, damaged, silent. The Emperor's body had been removed for internment elsewhere, but the throne itself stood empty, a golden seat for a god who no longer needed to sit. Pilgrims came by the millions, not to worship. Guilliman had been very clear about discouraging worship of the machine, but to remember, to understand, to see with their own eyes the place where the Emperor had spent 10,000 years suffering for them. It worked, mostly. The ecclesiarchy still preached their sermons about the God Emperor, still built their cathedrals and collected their tithes. But there was a growing movement, particularly among the younger generations, to focus less on worship and more on emulation. The Emperor showed us how to sacrifice for the greater good, they said. So we should do the same. Serve, protect, build. That's the real faith. Guilliman encouraged this movement quietly. He couldn't oppose the ecclesiarchy directly. They were too powerful, too embedded in imperial culture, but he could support alternatives. Could fund schools that taught the Emperor's actual philosophy. Could promote priests who preached service over supplication. Slow change, but change nonetheless. My role had evolved over the 5 years. I was no longer just a liaison. I'd become something stranger, a witness, someone who'd been present at the crucial moment and could testify to what had actually happened, what the Emperor had actually said, what his final wishes had actually been. I gave speeches, wrote accounts, spoke to planetary governors and chapter masters and tech priests and anyone else who would listen. Some heard me, many didn't, but slowly, gradually, the truth spread. The Emperor was dead and alive, a corpse and a god, a failure and a savior, and he wanted us to grow beyond our need for either. On this particular morning, I'd been summoned to the fortress of the custodians. They'd been different since that day, quieter, more contemplative. 3,000 of them had died holding the line in those final hours. The survivors carried that loss like a physical weight. I found Captain General Caius, Valoris's successor, in a meditation chamber overlooking the mountains. He stood in full armor, motionless as a statue, his guardian spear held in ritual position. "Adept-Prime Vex," he said without turning. "Thank you for coming. You honor me, Lord Custodian. How can I serve?" "By telling me what you see when you look at the Imperium now." I considered the question carefully. I see an empire learning to live with uncertainty. We've lost the stability of centralized control, but we've gained flexibility, resilience. Different sectors are experimenting with different governmental forms. Some will fail, others will thrive, and we'll learn from both. You sound optimistic. I'm terrified, I admitted, but also hopeful, because for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity is actually trying new things, actually adapting. The Emperor's death forced us to evolve or die. So far, we're choosing evolution. Caius finally turned to face me. His expression was unreadable behind his helmet. The custodians have been debating our purpose. For 10,000 years, we guarded the Emperor. We served him exclusively. Now he's gone from the material realm. So what do we guard? What do we serve? What does your heart tell you? That the duty hasn't changed. Only the method. The Emperor protects humanity from the warp. We protect humanity from more physical threats. We become his hands in the material universe, acting as he would act, serving as he would serve, not as masters, as guardians, as shepherds who guide but do not control. That sounds wise? It sounds terrifying. Caius echoed my earlier words. Because it means making decisions without his direct guidance, taking responsibility for our actions rather than simply following orders. Growing up, as you've said. He gestured toward the window, toward Terra spread out below. We're sending custodians into the galaxy, not to conquer, not to rule, but to watch, to intervene when necessary, to be the Emperor's representatives in a universe where he can no longer walk among us. It's a new crusade, quieter than the first, more subtle, but perhaps more important. He would be proud, I said. Perhaps. Or perhaps he would say, we're still clinging to him instead of standing on our own. That's the paradox we face. How do we serve his wishes when his wish was for us to stop serving? I had no answer for that. I suspected there was no answer, just the eternal struggle of trying to honor someone's memory, while also respecting their final request for you to let them go. We stood in silence for a while, watching the sun rise over Terra. There's something else, Caius said eventually. We've been monitoring the warp, the Emperor's war against the Chaos Gods. It's escalating. The fighting is more intense than anything recorded in Imperial history. He's not just defending anymore. He's attacking, pushing into their domains, trying to reclaim what they've corrupted. Is he winning? We don't know. The warp doesn't work on human timescales. A second there might be a century here, or vice versa, but the intensity suggests he's committed to total war, which means he's relying on us to handle everything in the Imperium without his intervention. So we can't fail. No, Caius agreed. We can't fail. Not because he's watching and judging, but because if we fail, his sacrifice meant nothing. He's giving us space to grow. The least we can do is actually grow. I returned to my office and found a message waiting. From Magos Kryn. He'd been recalled to Mars 6 months ago, summoned by the Fabricator General for consultation. I'd feared the worst. Punishment for supporting Guilliman's rejection of the new throne proposal. The message was brief. I have been appointed to the Martian Parliament. My task, oversee development of alternative solutions to warp travel difficulties. The Fabricator General remains opposed, but acknowledges that political reality requires compromise. Your moral stance has created space for new thinking. Progress is slow, but progress nonetheless. The Omnissiah works in mysterious ways. Or perhaps that's just humans learning to solve problems without divine intervention. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Kay, I smiled despite myself. Progress. Slow, painful, uncertain progress. But progress. Over the next months, I watched it happen across the Imperium. On Ultramar, Guilliman was establishing a model of governance that balanced efficiency with representation. Other sectors were watching, learning, adapting the principles to their own circumstances. On Mars, the Mechanicus was slowly, reluctantly moving toward reforms, allowing more innovation, questioning some of the more dogmatic rituals, acknowledging that the Omnissiah's death might mean the machine spirits required new forms of worship. In the Space Marine chapters, a renaissance of sorts. Without central direction from Terra, each chapter was rediscovering its unique character. Some became darker, others more idealistic, but all remained committed to the Emperor's ultimate vision, protecting humanity from the threats that would destroy it. And everywhere, on every world, in every community, ordinary people were learning to take responsibility for their own lives. The Emperor wasn't coming to save them. He was busy fighting cosmic battles in realms they couldn't imagine, so they had to save themselves. It was messy, chaotic, sometimes tragic. It was also beautiful. 10 years after the Emperor's death, I received one final summons. Lord Guilliman was preparing to leave Terra on a crusade across the galaxy. He wanted to see firsthand what had become of the Imperium, wanted to meet with chapter masters and planetary governors and assess the state of humanity's recovery. And he wanted me to come with him. I need someone who understands both sides, he explained. The technical and the spiritual, the machine and the meaning. You've spent 10 years bridging those worlds. I need that perspective. Lord Primarch, I'm honored, but I'm not a warrior. Not a diplomat. I'm just a tech priest who became something more. Guilliman interrupted. Who witnessed the Emperor's death and actually understood what it meant? Who chose principle over pragmatism when it mattered most? That's exactly what I need. So I'll ask, will you join me? I thought about the last 10 years, about everything I'd seen and learned, about the choice that old woman, Moriana, had warned me about, between the pragmatic and the sacred, between what works and what's true. I'd chosen the sacred, chosen truth, and somehow, miraculously, it had worked anyway. Yes, Lord Primarch, I said. I'll join you. Let's see what we've built from the ashes. He smiled. A real smile this time, not the tired expression of a being carrying impossible weight. Good. Then we depart in 3 days. I suggest you say your goodbyes to Terra. We'll be gone for a long time. I spent those 3 days visiting everywhere that mattered. The Sanctum Imperialis, where I said silent thanks to a god who never wanted to be worshipped. The maintenance sections, where I'd spent 23 years serving the Golden Throne. The offices, where I'd spent 10 years helping to rebuild an empire. On the final night, I stood on that same balcony and looked out over Terra one last time. The planet glowed with lights, trillions of lives continuing their daily existence, praying, working, loving, fighting, surviving, each one a small miracle, each one proof that the Emperor's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. I felt it then, one final time, that warmth, that presence, and I understood, with perfect clarity, what the Emperor had been trying to tell us all along. He wasn't our savior. He was our example. He'd shown us what sacrifice looked like, what duty meant, what it cost to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Now it was our turn, not to worship him, not even to thank him, but to do what he did. Stand against the darkness, hold back the tide and give others the chance to live. That was the real faith. The true devotion, not prayers or cathedrals or theological debates, just service, just sacrifice, just the choice, made every day to be better than we were, to be worthy of the God who died so we could finally grow up. I activated my Vox and sent one final message to Magos Kryn on Mars. The Emperor protects, so must we. His reply came instantly. The Omnissiah approves, even when he's dead, especially when he's dead. Good fortune on your crusade, old friend. 3 days later, I boarded Lord Guilliman's flagship and left Terra behind. The Golden Throne was dead, the God Emperor was born, and humanity's true test was just beginning. But as I looked out the viewport at the stars, at the Astronomican blazing brighter than ever, at the infinite possibilities ahead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly. Hope was too simple a word for what we faced, but purpose, direction. The understanding that we were finally, After 10,000 years of stagnation and suffering, moving forward, the Emperor's death had broken us. Now, we would see if we were strong enough to rebuild ourselves into something worthy of his sacrifice, something better than what we'd been, something that might someday actually deserve the faith of all those trillions who still whispered his name in the darkness. The Emperor protects. And so, now must we? The Crusade fleet assembled above Terra over the course of a week, 47 warships, ranging from escort frigates to the massive Macrage's Honor, Guilliman's personal flagship. Enough firepower to conquer a sector, enough personnel to administrate a small empire, and enough hope to believe that the fractured Imperium could still be saved. I stood in my assigned quarters aboard the flagship, staring at the small collection of possessions I'd accumulated over 33 years of Imperial service. Not much for a lifetime. A few data slates containing personal notes, a piece of the Golden Throne's outer casing that had fallen during the final assault, a worn copy of the Mechanicus Mysteries given to me during my initiation decades ago. Everything I was could fit in a single storage container. Traveling light, I turned to find a woman in administratum robes standing in my doorway. She was young, maybe 30 standard years, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much administrative chaos. Adept-Prime Vex? She asked. Just Vex now, I replied. I resigned my formal Mechanicus position when I accepted Lord Guilliman's offer. Who are you? Scrivener Militant Jessa Horn. I'm assigned as your administrative liaison for the Crusade. Apparently you're important enough to need one. She smiled slightly. The Lord Primarch values your counsel highly. My job is to make sure you have whatever you need to provide it. I'm a tech priest, not a counselor. You're a witness, she corrected. Someone who was there when everything changed. That makes you valuable in ways you probably don't realize. Half the Imperium thinks the Emperor's death was the end of the world. The other half thinks it was divine transformation. You actually know what happened. That's power. I don't want power. Then you're perfect for the job. The dangerous people are always the ones who want it. She gestured down the corridor. Come on. Lord Guilliman is holding a strategic briefing in 1 hour. As his newest advisor, you're expected to attend. The briefing chamber was intimidating. 36 of the Imperium's most powerful leaders assembled around a hololithic display showing the entire galaxy. Chapter masters from the Ultramarines, Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, and Dark Angels. Admiral Lord Cassian of the Solar Fleet. Inquisitor Lord Covenant, representing the Ordos. Marshal Helter of the Astra Militarum, and Lord Guilliman himself, standing at the head of the table like the demigod he was. I found a seat near the back, trying to be invisible. Adept-Prime Vex, Guilliman called out immediately. Please join me at the primary display. Your perspective will be crucial. Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt my organic heart rate spike. I walked to the front, acutely aware that I was a minor tech priest surrounded by legends who'd conquered worlds and commanded armies. Guilliman activated the display. The galaxy rotated slowly, marked with thousands of indicators showing Imperial holdings, lost territories, warp storms, and Xenos incursions. This is our current assessment, he began. 5 years after Terra's crisis, the Imperium is divided into roughly 700 semi-autonomous sectors. Approximately 40% maintain regular contact with Terra. Another 30% maintain sporadic contact. The remaining 30%, over 200 sectors, have had no contact whatsoever since the Astronomican failed. He zoomed in on the eastern fringe. This is the Dominion of Storms, 87 systems that have declared complete independence from Imperial authority. They claim that Terra's weakness justifies self-governance. They're not hostile yet, but they've stopped paying tithes and ignore all directives from the High Lords. Another zoom, this time to the galactic south. The Plague Kingdoms, 43 worlds that fell to Nurgle's corruption during the chaos after the Emperor's death. We've lost them completely. Quarantine is the only option. More markers appeared. The Blackened Stars, the Silent Reach, the Forgotten Provinces, all lost to warp storms, Xenos invasion, or simple collapse of governmental infrastructure. We estimate 3 trillion Imperial citizens are living in territories we can no longer effectively protect or govern. The room was silent. Our mission, Guilliman continued, is not reconquest. Not yet. We lack the resources. Instead, we're conducting what I'm calling a unity assessment. We'll visit every sector we can reach, evaluate their loyalty and capability, and begin rebuilding the networks that held the Imperium together. Trade routes, Communication protocols, defense pacts, the foundation for eventual reunification. And if sectors refuse to rejoin the Imperium, asked Chapter Master Calgar of the Ultramarines. Then we respect their choice, Guilliman replied. Forcibly conquering human worlds defeats the purpose of protecting humanity, but we also make clear that Terra offers support, resources, and protection they can't find anywhere else. We make rejoining the Imperium more attractive than independence. You're describing diplomacy, Inquisitor Covenant said, making the word sound like a disease. The Imperium was built on military conquest, and look where that brought us. Guilliman shot back. My father conquered the galaxy at the point of a sword. 30,000 years later, half of it rebelled, and we've spent 10,000 years bleeding from that wound. Maybe, just maybe, we should try a different approach. He turned to me suddenly. Vex, you've spent 5 years on Terra watching the reconstruction. What's your assessment? Can the Imperium be reunified peacefully? Every face in the room focused on me. I felt like a specimen under intense scrutiny. I took a breath. Not completely, no. Some territories are truly lost. But the majority, yes, because most of them don't actually want independence. They declared it out of necessity when Terra fell silent, not desire. They're desperate for reconnection, for trade, for protection against Xenos threats and chaos incursions. If we can prove Terra is functional again, if we can demonstrate that the Imperium still offers value, most will return willingly. What about the ones that won't? Marshal Helter asked. We let them go, I said. The Emperor's final message was about humanity learning to stand on its own. If some sectors genuinely want independence and can maintain it successfully, forcing them back into the fold violates everything he died for. We focus on those who want to be saved, not punishing those who want to be free. Several of the chapter masters looked uncomfortable. The Imperial Fist's representative actually growled, but Guilliman nodded. Exactly my thinking. This crusade is about rebuilding, not reconquering. About proving the Imperium deserves loyalty rather than demanding it at gunpoint. It won't be fast, it won't be glorious, but it might actually work. The briefing continued for 3 more hours, covering logistics, target sectors, timelines, and contingencies. By the end, my head was spinning with information about supply chains, warp route calculations, and diplomatic protocols. As the assembly dispersed, Chapter Master Calgar approached me. The Ultramarines' leader was a giant even among Space Marines, covered in honor markings and purity seals. You spoke well, he said. His voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who could crush my skull with one hand. Few have the courage to advocate mercy in a room full of warriors. I didn't advocate mercy, I replied. I advocated pragmatism. We can't conquer our way out of this crisis. We don't have the resources. Pragmatism, Calgar repeated thoughtfully. My Primarch has been using that word a lot lately. I think he learned it from you, or perhaps you learned it from him. Either way, it's refreshing to hear strategy that doesn't begin and end with, kill everything that opposes us. You don't agree with the approach? I'm a Space Marine. We were created to kill the Emperor's enemies. Diplomacy isn't in our gene code. He paused. But I'm also Ultramar-born. I've seen what my Primarch built there. A functional civilization that values its citizens instead of just exploiting them. It works, so perhaps this diplomatic crusade has merit. We'll see. He walked away, leaving me standing alone in the briefing chamber. Scrivener Horn appeared at my elbow. You just impressed Marneus Calgar. That's not easy to do. The Lord Primarch chose well when he recruited you. I just said what seemed obvious. The obvious is often what everyone else misses. Come on, I'll show you the ship. You'll be living here for the next several years. Might as well learn where everything is. The Macragge's Honor was less a ship and more a mobile city, kilometers long, carrying a crew of 30,000, with entire decks devoted to specific functions. Training halls, librarium archives, machine shops, chapels, gardens, for the Emperor's sake. Actual hydroponics gardens growing real plants. Lord Guilliman insists on maintaining morale, Horn explained as we walked through a garden level. Long-term void deployment destroys mental health. These spaces help. Crew members can come here, touch living things, remember what they're fighting for. I watched a group of ratings tending to the plants. They worked with obvious care, talking quietly among themselves, almost peaceful despite being aboard a warship in the middle of a galaxy-spanning crisis. The Imperium used to think of people as resources, I said quietly. Things to be consumed in the Emperor's service. Maybe that's changing. It has to change, Horn replied. We've consumed too many people. lost too many worlds. If we keep treating humans as expendable, eventually there won't be any left to save. We reached the observation deck, where massive viewing ports showed the void outside. Terra hung below us, beautiful and scarred, and beyond it, the Astronomican blazed, that impossible golden light visible even in real space, to those with the sensitivity to see it. "Do you feel him?" Horn asked suddenly. "The Emperor, I mean. People say he's everywhere now, watching, protecting." "Sometimes," I admitted, not like a voice, more like a presence, a warmth, the sense that someone's watching over you with genuine care. My grandmother says that's what gods feel like, that warm presence, that sense of being loved by something infinitely larger than yourself. Your grandmother is wise. She's also dead, killed during the riots when Terra thought the world was ending. Horn's voice was flat. She spent her whole life faithful, prayed every day, trusted the Emperor to protect her, and she died screaming in a crowd crush while people fought to board evacuation ships. I didn't know what to say. "I'm not angry," Horn continued. "Not at her, not even at the Emperor, really. But I wonder sometimes what the point of faith is if it doesn't actually save you from the bad things. If gods are real, but still let terrible things happen, what's the difference between them and just random chance?" "The difference," I said slowly, "is meaning. Random chance is chaos. Gods, or at least the Emperor, give us purpose, framework. The sense that our suffering isn't meaningless. Your grandmother died, but the Imperium survived. Terra survived. Billions of people who would have died in total collapse got to keep living. Her death was part of that somehow. Not a good part, not fair or just, but meaningful. That's a hell of a thing to believe. All faith is a hell of a thing to believe. That's what makes it faith instead of knowledge." We stood in silence, watching Terra slowly rotate below us. "The fleet departs tomorrow," Horn said finally. "Lord Guilliman wants to hit 4 sectors in the first month, all in the segmentum solar. All claim to be loyal but haven't sent representatives to Terra in 5 years. We're going to find out if their loyalty is real or just words. And if it's just words, then we remind them what loyalty to Terra actually means. Gently, if possible. Forcefully, if necessary. We're diplomats first, but we're still an Imperial crusade fleet. The guns are there if we need them." The next morning, I stood on the bridge as the fleet prepared to depart. Lord Guilliman occupied the command throne, surrounded by his advisors and fleet officers. I'd been given a position near the tactical displays, close enough to observe, but not so close I could interfere with actual operations. "All ships report ready," announced Admiral Cassian. "Then let's begin," Guilliman said. "Navigator, plot course for the Cypra Mundi system. Standard warp translation. The Imperium returns to its own." The ship shuddered as the warp engines engaged. Reality twisted. Through the observation ports, I watched Terra disappear, replaced by the swirling madness of the Imperium. But something was different. The warp had always been described as pure chaos. Nightmare visions and impossible colors. Entities pressing against reality's skin. Every journey a risk. Every translation a gamble with madness and death. This was calmer, still dangerous, still alien, but structured somehow. As if someone had imposed order on the disorder. As if a vast intelligence was actively pushing back the entities that threatened ships in transit. "The Emperor," breathed Navigator Primary Vex from her station. Her third eye was open, gazing into the warp. I can see him, not physically, but his presence, like a fortress of light in the darkness. "The demons can't approach. They're afraid." "Confirmed," reported the ship's astropath. "Warp conditions are optimal. No hostile entities detected. Transit time to Cypra Mundi, 14 hours, well below normal projections." Guilliman leaned back in his command throne. "My father keeps his promises. He said he'd protect us from the warp. Looks like he meant it." The journey that should have taken 3 days took less than 1. We emerged from the warp in the Cypra Mundi system with 0 casualties, 0 equipment malfunctions, and 0 signs of warp corruption. According to the ship's records, that was unprecedented. Cypra Mundi itself was a garden world, one of the few in the Imperium, its population numbering only 3 billion. When the crisis hit, they declared independence out of pure terror, assuming Terra's fall meant the Imperium's end. Now, confronted with a crusade fleet led by a Primarch, they surrendered that independence before Guilliman even finished his opening transmission. "Lord Guilliman," the planetary governor's message began, "forgive us. We thought Terra had fallen. We thought we were alone. But if you're here, If the Imperium stands, then we rejoin immediately, unconditionally. Please, just don't leave us in the dark again. It was pathetically easy. Over the next month, we visited 17 systems. 16 of them rejoined the Imperium on site. The 17th, a fortress world with delusions of empire, required negotiation, but ultimately capitulated when Guilliman demonstrated that Terra could still provide military support they desperately needed against an orc incursion. Not a single shot fired, not a single threat made, just presence, proof of stability, and the promise that the Imperium still existed and still cared. This is going better than I expected, Calgar admitted during a strategy review. I anticipated resistance, combat. Instead, we're being welcomed like liberators. Because that's what we are, Guilliman replied. These worlds weren't rebelling, they were afraid. We're showing them they don't need to be afraid anymore. That's far more effective than conquest. I watched it happen system after system. The same pattern. Initial fear, then recognition, then overwhelming relief. Planetary governors weeping as they swore loyalty oaths. Populations celebrating in the streets. Children seeing a Primarch for the first time, and understanding that the legends were real. The Imperium wasn't dead. It had just been sleeping, and now it was waking up. 3 months into the Crusade, we encountered our first real challenge. The Goldenrod sector. 19 systems that had formed a mutual defense pact and explicitly rejected Terra's authority. Their leader, Admiral Governor Tessa Voigt, refused even to meet with Guilliman. Terra failed us. Her message stated flatly, "The Emperor died, and your first instinct was to evacuate the leadership and abandon the rest. We survived on our own. We'll continue on our own. We don't need your Imperium." Guilliman studied the message for a long time. "She's not wrong," he said finally. "We did abandon most of Terra's population, saved who we could, but that was less than 1 billion out of trillions. From her perspective, Terra is the enemy. So we move on?" Calgar asked. "No, we prove her wrong. Show her that the Imperium she remembers isn't the Imperium we're building." He turned to me. "Vex, I want you to go down to Goldenrod Prime, alone, no warriors, no threats, just you, carrying a message from me to Governor Voigt. If anyone can convince her we've changed, it's someone who understands what change actually looks like." My stomach dropped. "Lord Primarch, I'm not a diplomat. You're a witness. That's better. You were there when it happened. You can tell her the truth, all of it, the terrible choices, the impossible mathematics, the reality that we couldn't save everyone, but tried to save who we could. She needs to hear that from someone who lived it, not from me." So I went. A single shuttle, carrying just me and a pilot, descended to Goldenrod Prime. The planet was industrial. Vast factories and shipyards, everything built for function over beauty. The kind of world that kept the Imperium running but never got remembered in the histories. Governor Voigt met me in a conference room that was pointedly modest. No imperial eagles, no devotional murals, just plain walls and functional furniture. She was maybe 50 years old, her face lined with stress and her eyes hard with suspicion. "You're the tech priest," she said without preamble. "The one who was there when the Emperor died." "Yes, Governor." "Tell me why I shouldn't have you executed as an enemy of the Goldenrod Compact." I sat down uninvited. "Because executing me accomplishes nothing except making you feel powerful. And you don't need to feel powerful. You already are. You've held 19 systems together without Terra's support for 5 years. That's genuinely impressive," she blinked, thrown by the direct approach. "You're not what I expected." "Good. Lord Guilliman sent me specifically because I'm not what anyone expects. I'm not a warrior or a diplomat. I'm just someone who saw the worst day in Imperial history and wants to make sure it meant something. What did you see?" So I told her everything. The Golden Throne's failure, the impossible mathematics of evacuation, the decision to save leadership over population, the quadrillions who died, the survivor's guilt that everyone who escaped still carried. And I told her about the Emperor's final message, about growth, about humanity, learning to stand without gods. When I finished, Voigt was silent for a long time. "You're telling me it was triage," she said finally. "That Terra chose to save who they could instead of dying with everyone else?" "Yes. That's still abandonment. Yes. It's also survival. We made the least terrible choice in a situation with no good choices. I won't ask you to forgive that, but I will ask you to understand it, and to consider that the Imperium you're rejecting isn't the same one that abandoned you. We're trying to build something different, something that actually values all its citizens, not just the leadership. Pretty words. Then judge us by actions. Lord Guilliman's offer. Goldenrod remains autonomous. You keep your defense pact, your governmental structure, your independence, but you rejoin the Imperium for trade, military coordination, and diplomatic support. You get the benefits without surrendering your sovereignty. And in exchange, Terra gets proof that the new Imperium can respect local autonomy instead of demanding submission. Voight studied me carefully. Why should I trust any of this? Because I'm sitting here, alone, in your power, telling you the uncomfortable truth instead of comfortable lies. If we wanted to conquer you, we'd have done it. Lord Guilliman commands enough firepower to reduce this world to ash. Instead, he sent one unarmed tech priest to talk. That's the Imperium we're trying to build. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the industrial sprawl. I need to discuss this with my fellow governors. We'll have an answer in 3 days. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. 2 days later, Governor Voight transmitted her response. Conditional acceptance. Goldenrod would rejoin the Imperium with guaranteed autonomy, a test case for the new model of governance Guilliman was proposing. When I returned to the flagship, the Primarch was smiling. You did it. You convinced her through honesty instead of force. That's exactly what we needed. I just told her the truth, Lord Primarch. Exactly. The truth is our best weapon now. The old Imperium was built on lies and fear. We're building a new one on honesty and hope. It's slower, harder, but it actually works. The crusade continued. Sector after sector, some welcomed us, some negotiated, some rejected us entirely, and we respected their choice. Slowly, painstakingly, the Imperium began to knit itself back together. Not as it was, as something new, something that might actually deserve the loyalty it demanded. And through it all, I felt him, the Emperor, watching from the warp, fighting battles we couldn't imagine, protecting us so we had the space to grow. The Golden Throne was dead, but the promise it represented, that humanity would survive, would endure, would eventually thrive, that promise lived on in every system we saved, every treaty we negotiated, every choice we made to value people over power. The Emperor protects. And so, finally, do we.